to Reimagining America's Dream, podcast number 1, entitled Reimagining America's Dream. How do we make it attainable for all? I'm Dr. Bernie Mullen, known as Dr. B, and we're coming to you from my home in Denver, Colorado. This is the first in a series of 12 podcasts, which focus on providing solutions to the top 10 social issues Americans are facing today. And that's according to Pew Research with post-voting polls. Voters outlined their biggest concerns and beliefs on the issues that most influence their habits and opinions. Today's podcast is, as I said, the topic on the book is called RAD, R-A-D for short. It has a subliminal message of reimagining America's dream, the R standing for Republicans, D for Democrats, and A for those of us in the middle. I consider myself to be an independent, moderate, fiscal conservative with a warm heart and a social conscience. And that's what this book is really all about, particularly in a presidential election year like we have in 2024, with an upcoming election where the majority of voters saying they don't want either of the candidates. This is not about creating a third party. It's not about creating a third candidate, but it is about talking about solutions that directly target the nastiness that we find in our country today. So this is hopefully for everybody, but certainly targeted Pew Research saying 60% of Americans fit somewhere in the middle as independents, moderates, centrists, or slightly left, slightly right. The book is being published by the Aspire Difference Foundation, which I formed last year to support single parents with their mental health first and educational development of their preschool children second. TADF, the Aspire Difference Foundation, provided financial and other support is primarily designed to ensure a stable household first and then help the children's education, with the goal that those children, most of whom will come from income-deprived homes, are able to enter kindergarten, able to read, write, and do basic math skills and be socialized for success. We believe that that is the single biggest factor stopping people, particularly minorities and poor, from achieving the American dream. We also believe that this will completely change the trajectory of these young people's lives. To that end, all proceeds from the book and all my business consulting income, net of any direct expenses, is given to TADF to support this work. If you'd like to support us with a donation or a purchase of a book, please go to the AspireDifferenceFoundation.org website or to my consulting website, berniejmullen.com. So let's talk about the podcast topic today. How do we get the American dream to be aspirational for everybody and available for everybody going forward? As an immigrant myself, and this is the 50th year I've lived in America, I will moderate the panel, and after our panelists speak, I'll share my own background where appropriate and where it's not redundant. Having come originally from Europe and now seen America in the last 50 years and the amazing change that represents. Our panelists today are, first of all, Aditi Charnoubi, CEO of FanEQT, not so subtle, FanEQT. Very, very smart branding by Aditi, who is an immigrant, and she'll speak about that. In her company, FanEQT, they're building a very innovative marketplace where fans can buy a stake in their favorite teams and stadiums, invest in their favorite athletes, and support the community. And of particular interest to her as a very, very successful businesswoman, of course, is gender equity, because there aren't that many female owners in sports. My second panelist is Michael Ditchfield, businessman, author, motivational speaker, restaurateur, some of the best food in town, I can assure you, and humanitarian. So what's our agenda? What was the American dream? Which basically was, if you work hard, you'll get ahead. And the idea that you could come to America and be whatever you wanted to be, the land of opportunity. Second part, what's it become today, if anything, for Americans? And there's two articles that are particularly relevant in that respect. One is an ABC TV article, which basically says the American dream is pretty well unattainable for most people, and an Axios article that basically says people don't care about the American dream anymore. They're not focused on it. So what does it become, if anything, for Americans today? And then finally, what should it be, and how can we get it back? But this time, again, truly being attainable for everybody. So I'm going to start it off and ask Aditi to please introduce herself and talk about her move to the USA and her life growing up and how that was her realization of the American dream. Aditi Charnoubi.
Thanks, Bernie. Thank you for having me here today. Aditi Charnoubi, CEO of FanEQT. Bernie, thank you for giving such a good introduction. So as you know, Bernie, I grew up in India in a very small town called Jaipur. I wouldn't say small by population, but small in terms of modernization and the amenities available at the time when I grew up. I went to an all-girls school. I actually had a very protected upbringing, and academics has been very big in India. So much of my life, earlier life, was spending long hours studying and a little bit of focus on sports. The dream to come to America was definitely shared with my father. My father went to MIT. I always looked up to my father. And he talked about how America is a land of opportunity. Just like you said, you can pretty much become anything if you put your heart, mind, and soul to it. And as girls, I have a sister, as girls, he always inspired us to become independent, to build our own lives, to stand on our feet before we got married or started with various life expectations as a society would have it in India for sure. And so that's what motivated the journey to come here. I came here for education to Carnegie Mellon, and that's how I came to America.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Mike Ditchfield, as you'll know from his accent, sounds a lot more like I did, but I've lost most of my accent. So, Mike.
So I came over here many years ago, having left a professional soccer background, bachelor's degree background, and was really seeking something a little bit different. And America was calling. So I came over here, worked in some Jewish camps in the Poconos for the first summer, went back to England, did my third year bachelor's degree, and decided there's something special about America. In England, you're born into a very closed society and you stay in it. You don't change. America is a much more open society, as I found out for that first taste of 8 weeks. So I knew that my calling was something a little bit different, because there's not much change coming from an English background, but yet change is inevitable in America. So I decided to come, and I stayed, went to Penn State, studied my master's degree, taught at Penn State, coached at Penn State, and then ended up in Denver. And everything was this huge candy shop of opportunity. And I knew that this is where I wanted to stay, and change had to be made. Because again, being born into a cultural part of society in England, you're locked into that. And that closed society is kind of your prison. Same animal in a different cage over here, but the cage door is open. So what I saw, and I've had no regrets because of what I've accomplished and the friendships that I have built, but I am still a guest of this country, and I respect the laws of this country and everything that goes to it. And I've been able to do things that I could never have imagined, and that's going to Africa, where I've been to many times. Got to write a book similar to Bernie in terms of Life's Too Short for Leftovers, 9 lessons from a third world kitchen. So going to Africa, you really see other things. You see corruption, you see loving families, you see children being brought up in poverty, but with a will to make their lives better. So again, my opportunity has been forged by this country allowing me to stay, and where I will always stay, but just leave to go back to Africa.
Thank you both. Very quickly, I came to the United States at age 23. First visit was actually age 21, summer camp, soccer counselor, wealthy Jewish kids up in Maine, phenomenal experience. Came back in 72 as the head soccer counselor. Then in 73, the owner of the camp, a beautiful man who I consider to be, somewhat of a godfather for me. He's the one that told me that my father had passed away after my first summer here, and after that became somewhat of a surrogate dad for me. Gave me a scholarship. So in 73, I came for grad school, and I've stayed ever since. And, one of the big factors for me, which is, leading into the next question, first for you, Mike, is who were the people that helped you the most assimilate into America? And are they still in your lives? Because a large part of what we're talking about in the book obviously deals with immigration, a very hot topic in America right now. But who helped you, and what kind of help did they give you?
Well, the first gentleman that was a part of my life was Walter Barr, and he was the head soccer coach at Penn State and introduced me to the university system of America. Both his sons kicked in the NFL, Chris Barr and Matt Barr, and that was my opportunity to learn from someone that was a second father to me. What he did was very similar to, I look at it as a kitchen, and you've got the kitchen pantry and you've got the pots and pans. And the pots and pans are 5 or 6 people that will be always in your life, people who will be in your wedding. The kitchen pantry, we're always changing, constantly changing. Those are people who come into your life for the reason, season, or a lifetime. But those main 5 or 6 people have grown, one of which is you. You are an inspiration to me throughout my time here. But Walter Barr and then Noel Cunningham, who introduced me to humanitarianism and showed me that, hey, the world is a big place out there. What have you done for the world lately, Ditchfield, was what he said. And he said, you're coming to Ethiopia. You are seeing that. So when I look at things like that, I look at a Noel Cunningham, a Walter Barr, and a Bernie Mullen that have been such an important component of my life. And lots of other people that we touch and come back to and go out, reach. But there's a few people that are the pots and pans, and those are the people that I value.
Thank you. It's a great analogy. And just for our viewers, Noel Cunningham was an Irishman who was a restaurateur. He actually was Michael Jackson's personal chef for a period of time. Had very successful restaurants across the country in Los Angeles, California, and then here in Denver, who sadly passed away a few years ago, but great humanitarian. Best thing we can say about Noel is he gave up his restaurant at least 20 nights a year, paid for all the food, drink, serving of all the staff out of his own pocket, and donated those proceeds to numerous charities, wonderful charities. Aditi, who were your influences when you first moved here, and how did they help you and the impact they had on you?
Sure. So I think when I first moved here, it was with Carnegie Mellon. So it was the friends I made on my freshman dorm floor, very simply put. And then some relationships we had with family friends who became my guardians when I moved here. I have seen that many of them did stick as a part of my life, and we've gone in and out throughout the journey, but they have been a fairly significant part of my family and personal life. Professionally, we've all taken different routes here. Steve, my husband, also I met in college. In fact, he's the one who taught me how to drive on the right side of the road here, because in India we drive on the other side. And so I have very fond memories since, and now I have kids with him. And then I've also seen, like, people have generally been very nice and welcoming. And as I've changed my career and grown and lived in different cities here, I've always seemed to find my nook. And that's what I've really appreciated about living here.
Thank you. Moving on to, as you were living here, how did the American dream start to manifest itself in your life? Was it in your head aspirationally? I was blessed at a very young age, I think starting at age 8, that I had a Canadian uncle. A Canadian uncle was actually my mother's uncle. who brought his whole family over from Montreal, and he'd started working in a cork factory and befriended the owners of the factory who had no children and became their surrogate son. And later on, he inherited the cork factory, became very wealthy. And he talked to me about North America, albeit Canada, as the land of milk and honey. I had my dad's cousin, who again, Uncle Percy, who was a vice president with Vicks Pharmaceuticals. And he came to build a factory in England, stayed 15 months, and inspired me about the American dream. How did that germ start to develop for you in your head? And what was that aspiration?
I can go here. So as I was saying, it was always my dad. So my dad went to MIT. My dad's got multiple graduate degrees. I think he did a physics degree from MIT. And he moved back to Jaipur, India to set up 3 different factories. He was a very successful businessman. So to me, what he did was very inspirational and actually very surprising as well, because MIT or Boston compared to Jaipur, and especially at the time in the 70s when he did this, was a very different landscape. It still remains a very different landscape today. But in terms of opportunity, sure, there's a lot more today in India as well. So it always, the inspiration always came from there. And I had met a couple more friends and families that chose to stay back, and they made a life for themselves here. I think for me, the American dream was always, as a woman, how do you become independent? How do you do what you want to achieve things in life before you do the societal norms? And that was very important to get my financial independence. And that's what I'd always thought my American dream would be, having a house, having my independence, and living a stable life. And that's what inspired me to come here.
Thank you. Mike, the same question.
Well,
Early days, how did it evolve?
In the early days, again, that dream I fell into, and spending my first time in Pennsylvania was great, got the flavor again, wanted it again, and came over to work another summer at Penn State, and I never left. And I include that in my book, that I literally jumped off an airplane in Boston because my dream was slowly being taken away, because I knew I wanted to stay here. Could I go back there, following my father's footsteps, continuing playing professional soccer? But that is, to a certain extent, a rut. Great for values, and everything that I grew up with has carried over into here. But I am still living the dream, as I mentioned, at Penn State, and then moved west because I wanted to taste a little bit more with the people that wanted to bring me out here. So my dream is still alive based on the people that I knew, but to be invited to the White House as a guest of President Bush, to actually be in the presence of so many wonderful people throughout my life, I am still living the dream, but I'm a guest in that dream.
Yeah, interesting. For me, obviously, I landed at the University of Kansas for graduate school. And the families there that befriended my ex-wife, who was English, the mother of my 3 kids, is English and now American like me. And they just really made America comfortable to us, including, I can remember getting the bus, the free bus at Kansas in Lawrence, took us to the grocery store, but didn't come back. It didn't do the loop around back to where our apartment was. So we had the choice of sit on it for an hour and do a whole loop till they came back to the house, or start walking, carrying groceries. And they were the ones that sold us their old Volkswagen Squareback at, ridiculous discount price, because we were just, graduate school, working on my own money, So moving on, how has the dream changed over the years? First with you, Mike, this time.
Well, the dream has been a little bit tainted, especially in the last few years. I think the future is looking back in complete disgust about what is going on. And I've never seen a more sadder time globally. I mean, what I've seen in Sudan and Rwanda and Ethiopia and Ghana, I thought, that was bad, because I've seen things that no one wants to experience. And so I always felt blessed coming back to whatever America still gave me. Still no desire to go back and live in England, but felt my history tugging at me. But the dream for me, because of how I created the parts of that dream, have always been very positive. But I just look back now, if you take politics out of any equation, all you're left with is common sense. And I think we're losing the values of common sense in everything that we're experiencing right now. So again, there's good days and there's bad days. There's things that I want to experience. We're brought into this world without being consulted. We leave without choice. And everything that happens in between is usually someone else's fault. And we're always pointing fingers at each other when there's three pointing back at us. So I think accountability, no matter what level of politics, no matter what level of life, we have to do a reevaluation of ourselves to maintain this dream.
Yeah, no, very well said. You know, and for me, the dream has evolved to 3 children of my own and a stepson who I consider also of my own. So 4 kids and 6 grandkids. I spent yesterday afternoon. The kids had a half day at their primary school, and I went over and played soccer with them. And it was a lovely sunny day here in Denver. And that's the dream. The dream is for them. And, you know, certainly the book gets into a lot of the nastiness that we have in this country right now. And it used to be that you have a different opinion to me, therefore you have a different opinion to me, and we agree to disagree. You know, now it comes with labels and nastiness and in some cases hatred, which is just, it's beyond comprehension to me, really. Aditi, same question for you. How has it adapted and evolved?
Yeah, I think the dream for me has evolved. It started with a simple dream of making a space for myself and being independent, to wanting to achieve something and being very ambitious. Once I had kids, I have 3 kids as well. So once I had children, I suddenly realized that I did not really have a work-life balance. And there was a huge deprivation of culture, of religion, of support structure, and especially with terms of healthcare and childcare. And just when everything started coming together, I did feel a bit of a tug. And for the longest time, I was considering my options if I should move back or not. But just like both of you, what really keeps me here is the opportunity still today. Despite whatever's going on, I think there's a lot more the country offers and the society offers. And in terms of making my space, I have continued to evolve in that sense. But I did have a little bit of a turmoil going through it the last many years.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the biggest turmoil I had, 1988, I got divorced. You know, although I had a really good 6-figure salary as an executive with the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team, I had 3 kids, you know, 13, 11, and 8, and I was terrified. It took probably 2 months before we could get, you know, a nanny, and fortunately someone who was going through school to become a qualified teacher, and we're really blessed to find a wonderful young woman that really helped the kids when I was, you know, late night, 11 o'clock at night, and later if it was extra innings at Three Rivers Stadium. So really, really important. You know, the next question is, in November 23, so very recently, Axios took a poll that said the American dream is dying. It's dying. To you, Aditi, do you agree?
I don't think the American dream is dying. I think it's morphing. I think it started as a social order, simplicity, white picket fence, having a house, having a family, having 3 kids, to now being that of innovation, inclusion, opportunity. I think we morphed to having a Silicon Valley dream. When the tablets and computers and laptops came out, everybody wanted to have the latest gadget. And people now are in a rat race, or like working around the clock, because they want everything. Not that they want to live to the fullest potential, but they want to do exactly what someone else is doing. So I think the American dream has changed to that, from being a simpler dream. But I think that's how the society and the world is changing at large. So it's just a morphing in my mind.
Yeah, just to tag on to that slightly, I won't embarrass the particular politician, but a politician who is part of the so-called progressives recently excused, so these flash mobs that go into the big department stores and steal large amounts of clothing and apparel. Typically, if the state has or the city has a cap of we won't prosecute unless it's over $1,000, they will look at the price tags and make sure they got $994 worth of clothing. And her statement was, these people have nothing. What do you expect? And so when we have a politician that pseudo endorses outright theft, and it's not so much the act, it's the thinking behind it. I know it's a tough issue and it's a political football, Aditi, but could you comment on that?
So I definitely think that is wrong. To endorse something or to let them get by with just that is absolutely wrong. Politics has definitely been difficult. I have never been a political person. I definitely sit in the middle, not Republican. I don't align with the Republicans nor the Democrats. But I do feel there's a lot of political turmoil, but one has to still keep logical and keep on working hard. And I think really, if there is a country in the world, it is still America in my mind, where you can become anything. Heck, Bernie, you know, my background has always been in fintech and technology, but never really in sports. But I was able to change my life in the last 8 or 9 months and make a little bit of space here for myself as well. So regardless of the political turmoil and the pandemics, et cetera, I think the American dream has survived.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mike, same question.
Yeah, the survival, I mean, COVID changed a lot of things, thinking and everything, and we became a very calm world. You know, Mother Nature took a big breath, and we saw the changes there, and I think we were more at peace than we've been, that I have seen. Again, I use Africa as my true north and how they are functioning, but the fact is I still want to come back to this. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the American dream for me, day to day, some days it's tainted, but again, then you have the balance that we need in life, because going out there and making that living but not having a life is so different. So again, we are blessed to be in this country. And I come back and I stress that. But when you see what is happening with this country, I mean, we are all equal. We're just different. And those differences will keep us together. It will push us apart. And when we have a middle class is certainly in Africa, keep everybody honest. And we must have that middle class. Over here, that middle class, is it middle of the road? I don't know. But I'm independent. And I think that the Republicans have got great things, the Democrats, but what they bicker over just leaves us to question ourselves. And you get these cult followings, whether it's in politics or robbing the stores. But something has to be done. You've got to stand for something, otherwise you'll fall for anything.
Yeah.
And I'm just a believer that we do take things personally. We are selfish in a way, but our selfishness allowed us to dare to dream. But how can we add and aid the people that are immediately around us? And hopefully that'll be the ripple approach that will go through. I don't think there's any right answers right now or wrong answers. It's just a case of common sense prevailing.
Thank you. In the book, I talk a lot about a balanced stool. It's something I used to teach years ago when I did a lot of stress management work at the New York Stock Exchange. Interestingly enough, they had all kinds of problems with the workers having heart attacks and strokes, and with the U.S. Navy, the War College, Newport, Rhode Island, and with the Federal Reserve Bank. And the concept of the stool is that your life needs to be balanced, and to be balanced, you need to have 4 legs like a healthy stool. And the 4 legs, number 1 was recognition of some kind of higher power, something bigger than yourself. Number 1. For me as a Catholic Christian, that's God. It doesn't have to be God. In the book, we refer to the driving force of the universe, so as not to offend anybody and be politically correct. But it doesn't take anything away from You've got to have a North Star, and that North Star has to have values. And you don't compromise those values, number one. Number two, our concept was the second leg of the stool is F dot, A dot, M dot, I dot, L dot, Y dot. We stole it from Greg Schiano, football coach at Rutgers, left to be the football coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the NFL, now back at Rutgers. Rutgers happens to be one of my company's client partners. And what does it stand for? Forget about me, I love you. And Greg had every Rutgers football player have F dot, A dot, M dot on the back of the jersey, not their own name. And so, you know, with my kids, my grandkids, and their spouses and partners, the 16 of us that I feel is the patriarch of the family, and it's my job to make sure they achieve and enjoy the American dream. You know, they basically pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. You know, all original values. The third one was a career, really a vocation, something you're passionate about with the focus of do what you love and you'll love what you do. And the final one was community, making sure the community around you is important. And what I wrestle with, whether it's pull $20 and give it to the person at the traffic lights who is homeless, you know, who wants money, or spend more of my time and more of my money in organized donations and charity like the Aspire Difference Foundation, which is what I do. And how do we make that community better? And so it's a focus of stick with what's close to you and what you can change. You know, and it is very much it takes a village to raise a child approach, but just in that village. So focus on my own village and focus on the things around us. So that's part of that concept. So going back to you first this time around, Mike. January 24, so recent ABC TV poll. American dream is far from reality for most people.
It is tough because they are living their own personal lives. I mean, we do so much in the community. How does that spread out? We gravitate towards things that are very near and dear in our lives. And that tangibility is our day-to-day existence, whether the tangibility of work, the tangibility of poverty, the tangibility of community activism. We see things through our own eyes. What we want to do is to keep that dream going, but as we've seen, it's very difficult to do. You talk about that community and that tangibility. If you lost someone to breast cancer, you deal with that society. If you've lost someone to cancer, you deal with that. There are all these things that we see things through. And just as you mentioned, how do we know what we are giving is getting to the sources where it's supposed to be? The most corrupt aspect of Africa are governments. The most honest are Rotarians. So you're dealing with people, and these people are the happiest when they're living their own lives. It's what we are dealing with in terms of this dream that is very self-centered, and good people can spread that dream out to show there is an opportunity. And I remember my watershed in life in terms of my dream and being able to deal with those less fortunate was after Mark Cuban, who did a documentary in Ethiopia called The Green Famine about our life at Project Mercy, and we had 1,800 children. Their vision of the world is we are living a dream because we have full bellies. And our dream is the same that should be implemented here.
Yeah.
And I'll remember, we had 600 people at the Soul Ballroom downtown Denver. We showed the documentary. There wasn't a dry eye in the place. The governor was there, the mayor was there, and 2 weeks later, my life changed. And I was in the parking lot in Larimer Square, drove down, rainy December evening, and I looked over, and there was an Ethiopian ticket collector. And he looked at me and he said, "You were in that movie, weren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I was." He said something to me I will never hear again, and very few people do. He said, "Thank you for saving my people." When you hear that, your life changes. It's not a massage, it's not temperate. So being able to show people how to get out of poverty, to give them the tools to work through that. I mean, we deal with mental health. Mental health is one of the toughest things that if you take gun violence within the poor areas. And we say, well, guns don't kill people. It's people who have mental health problems. But what do we cut? We cut money to mental health.
Yeah.
So those are all those things of so many different components of a jigsaw. And we've got to complete that jigsaw. But right now, even if we did that, there's a couple of pieces missing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the Aspire Difference Foundation is focused on single parents
Yep.
with preschool children. And the first stop is mental health of the
Yeah.
caregiver to build a stable home, and then the second stop is what are the educational tools and support we can give to that child so they can read and write and do basic math when they get into kindergarten. Aditi, very powerful. Thank you, Michael. Aditi, the same question.
Yeah, that was really powerful, Michael. I don't know how to come at the end of it, but I think the last few years has been very tough globally. It's been equally tough here, just with the pandemic and how people have dealt with it, what has come out of it, and how I think everyone is really valuing their situation in their life. So whether it is being more self-centered, but at the same time, the opportunities are still limited. The inflation has increased. The healthcare or childcare challenges still remain. And there's still a large part of the workforce that is not really working because of various limitations around them. So I think to your point, Bernie, about whether it's doubling down on education and starting at a very young age or providing that extra help and support, whether it's for mental health and just dealing with situation and moving forward. I think that's what's been missing or been more prominent since we've all gone through a very few hard years here.
Thank you. A segue, and I'll ask this of you first. Is the dream aspirational? So if we're missing the dream, we're missing the aspiration. So is the dream aspirational? And if so, how do we get it back for more Americans? For you, Aditi.
I don't think we're missing the dream. I do believe the dream has changed. And with that, I do think we need to support people more. Like Michael called upon mental health and providing better support. You called upon educational health for pre-kindergarten kids. I think there's a lot more we can do for the society. Simple things like vocational training, providing them a lot more help during their high school years, which are very formative right before they go to universities. Universities are very expensive, which results in very high student loans, and people are not able to come out of it for a very long time. So I think just providing people support would help them achieve their American dream for more.
No, well said. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I think when we look at that mental health, that aspect is there. And again, what are we taking away? What makes this whole healthcare? We look at Canada, we look at England, and what we do towards of that. And there's good and bad in a lot of systems in terms of how we help people. But these pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, they get rich by saying no. And that's the way it is. And until we get a grasp of that, we're going to struggle there, because mental health is part of that whole system. And when Bernie talked about my mentor, Noel Cunningham, he died of what people call compassion fatigue. He took his own life, and he texted me a few hours before he took his life, and he said one thing, and it was the last chapter in my book. He said, "Thank you." And we don't say thank you enough. And that was a whole thing, that when Noel gave so much, the mental aspect of all his compassion and giving finally took its toll. And you wonder how many people out there have different kinds of fatigue that brings about that. And to see the absolute, which is the suicide, which is something that is becoming more prevalent these days. We have to be there for people. Sometimes we don't see it. You look at Robin Williams, as happy as anybody. Who would have known that he took his life the way he did? So the things that press upon us, and having in the last few months had another couple of people take their lives, it weighs on you. But you've got to rise up in the morning, you've got to fight it and keep doing what you're doing to keep that dream alive. Some days it'll be there with you, other days it won't. But it's like it's a stepping stone or a stumbling block. That's the obstacle in life, and it's how you look at it that I think gets us through with that dream.
Yeah, and without a shadow of a doubt, the more positive people were able to do that. And obviously, with Noel's case, you're right. He had nothing left. He'd given it all away, and whether he was too proud, he just wouldn't ask all of us to give back to him. And our biggest regret is we weren't there for him.
Right.
I'm going to add on at the end of both your answers. So, Mike, you first this time. Why, in your opinion, is the dream so hard to accomplish for the poor? There are poor people that rise up amazingly, for those who've been marginalized. And there are marginalized people who raise up amazingly. One of my closest friends when I was at the NBA was the head of security. He had been head of the FBI in Buffalo, New York. He had been number 2 in the FBI in Washington, D.C. Single parent mom, 3 boys. She basically said, you ain't going out of the house and going in the neighborhood. When you get home, you are going to study and you are going to go to college. And her determination was amazing. And yet neighbors on either side killed or in jail. So why is it so hard for the poor, marginalized? And by definition, that means so many minorities who are overrepresented in the poor and marginalized communities. Why is it so hard for them to achieve the dream?
Well, we've touched on many, many things today, whether it comes back to that education. And I think that it's the exception, not the rule, of this thriving and rising. And I think we have to provide more of a stable foundation on which we can turn things. Remember the past, cherish it, don't live in it. So we have to do things, we have to create things that are different now. There's got to be a willingness as well. And not everybody's going to follow that, but that poverty is there. It's a part of society. And again, I just come back with my comparison. And again, my comparisons are not really of England, they're of Africa, which is one extreme. By creating that middle class, it keeps people honest. By giving all the landowners in Sudan and Ethiopia a certain portion of acreage to grow things so that they feel proud within themselves. Daniel Deng, who it was the one that I took back to see his mother in Sudan. He came up, he was one of the lost boys of the Sudan. The 5,000, only 80 females, the rest, all males, came to America through the Bush government, and they created something that they're saying we came from incredible poverty, but poverty looking down a gun barrel. And I said to Daniel Deng, because he contacted me and said, I was poor, but I'm rich in heart because I want to get out of this. And then we met, and he said, I want to go home to Panyagor. I want to see my mother that I haven't seen since the Second Civil War. And there he was in a wheelchair. And he says, we think it's tough. It's the view you have in life from where you're situated. But more importantly, it's what you want to do. So I didn't follow in his footsteps. I followed in those tracks in Ethiopia to take and see that the poor, there are opportunities. It's a willingness to do it, but you've got to give them the foundation through education, through health, to rise.
Yeah, thank you. Aditi, I'll let you speak, and then I'll talk about what the book's all about with this respect of what we're advocating and what we're pushing for. So same question, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I do agree. It's the foundation and the helping hand that you need to provide. Things have just become harder. I think inflation has been on the rise, which has also led to the divide being larger. The taxation has increased, simple things like that in life over here. A cup of coffee today costs $6 outside, but it's not as if people's incomes in, lower middle class have increased equivalently higher. So each and every simple thing of life, which is not really a necessity, but something that was a habit has become that much more expensive. So that's definitely been defeating to a lot of people. So if we do provide them a helping hand, if we provide them education, healthcare, childcare, help the society grow as a whole and have a lot more people in the workforce, I think that will help solve some of this.
No, that's great. Thank you. Let me, as I've said before, there are 10 top voter topics in America. And there may be some argument. For some, it might be women's reproductive rights. Others, it may be democracy. But generally speaking, we address them in the book in order of the priority. And number one is the income gap. And what we're recommending, number one, is a federal national minimum wage that eliminates poverty. We are the country on the world and the globe that has the highest GDP and the highest rate of poverty. That's inexcusable. We cannot allow that to continue. So let's have a federal national minimum wage. You know, we're talking to you from the city of Denver, although Aditi is remoting in from Washington, D.C., or sorry, in a D.C. suburb. What does that mean? Here in Denver, it's $32,000 is the minimum wage. My own company, we have 7 employees at the University of Denver. They all make that minimum wage. Before COVID, they were getting paid $24,000 base. Now they're $32,000, plus commissions, bonuses, etc. You know, a good employee for us as a sales consultant is making mid-40s first year coming out of college. Not what someone coming out with a finance degree, you know, but certainly what people, if they go to the Yankees, they're not going to make that. And our program is 3 years before they become a manager, you know, if they have the focus and dedication. Number one. Number two, working with the banks and mortgage companies to eliminate redlining. A house on this side of a highway that's in a black neighborhood is 40 to 50% lower in value than the same house on the other side of that street that is in a white neighborhood. It's got to stop. We have to obviously be able to support these young people in terms of their ability to buy their own home and be able to live the American dream, not just defined by home ownership, but by creating generational wealth. What's behind that? The program, the next topic is education, and the way we're recommending solving some of the educational problems is to create generational wealth. How are we proposing to do that? Number one, free preschool. Not all states have, or cities have preschool. The Hope Scholarship in Georgia, where I used to live in Atlanta, does exactly that. We need that nationwide. For single parents, particularly, massive improvements. We need preschool and post-school babysitting in the school so that there's no latchkey kids. The program for high school has 4 elements to it. As a 14-year-old, as a freshman, before your freshman year in high school, you go to an 8-week boot camp. It's not about guns and military. It's a civics boot camp. You have to exercise every day. You're taught how to cook. You're taught how to eat healthy things. You're taught how to take money, save it, and how to use it. You are paid the minimum wage, $5,000, for an 8-week sleepaway experience where you are with black, brown, yellow, white, whatever, rich, poor, doesn't matter. To Michael's point about there has to be a middle class. When we've offshored so many of the manufacturing jobs, we've offshored so much of middle class. We have to change that. But that kid then has a work experience in their sophomore summer, junior summer, and the summer before the senior year. In each of those years, they work in a private company, one time minimum. They work for a charity minimum once, and they work for a government agency. At 18, they would have $20,000 earned and in the bank, and if they save it, and we're advocating no tax deductions, no Social Security, nothing, 100% goes in if the kid saves it, and the bank gives them 7.5% interest. At the age 18, they would all have $25,000 in cash and be able to buy their own apartment. In most cities, or certainly some of the bigger cities, they'd have to be out in the suburb. Then we're advocating $15,000 voucher each year for the 4 years of college or professional education, so that you shouldn't have, if you go to a state institution, you shouldn't have student loans. in either of the cases, and you then start off on your career to create generational wealth. This is for everybody, rich, poor, no matter. And so that's what we put together. So finally, I'll go with you, Aditi, first. We represent three people on the podcast who have had good family support to get educated, to get college degrees. We're not the typical people that hopefully will be the recipients of the American dream going forward, other than our own families. But what must we do as regular citizens to help return the aspirational element of the dream, and then more importantly, to make the American dream attainable for all? Aditi first, please.
I think being a lending hand, leading by example, helping people, whether it's with mental health or any other kind of issues, finding ways to keep people engaged and motivated. And this starts at a very young age, whether it's with education or extracurricular activities, so that they don't deviate and get distracted and get into trouble. Those are some of the things we can do as a society to kind of create, to your point, the generational wealth, lead them in the right direction. I don't really know how to solve for inflation or the taxation issues, but that definitely needs to be addressed, because the taxation does not serve every strata of society the same.
Yeah, I mean, I've got an economist who's worked with me on all of the economics of this. All of our programs, including all the other things like, universal health care at no cost, which is the single biggest cause of bankruptcy and destruction of middle class in America right now, along with offshoring jobs. There are a lot of other things there, and the cost of it is minimal when you stack it up against the cost of us supporting, 20 years of war in Afghanistan, what we're doing in Ukraine, what we're doing with Gaza and in Israel, war going on there. So it's pretty interesting how the solutions like universal health care is the Office of Management and Budget of the United States government says we will spend less on universal health care than we're spending right now in terms of employer contribution and employee contribution to healthcare insurance. It's cheaper. Why are we not doing it? Why is everything a political football? I don't get it. Like Michael said before, why does the right say it's all about mental health and the left say it's all about highly available guns? We have over 3 guns per person in America right now out there. And I am absolutely not advocating changing the Second Amendment at all. In the book, it simply says there are things we can do. I don't think the founding fathers thought that we were going to give people permission, individuals, to have guns that shoot off 100 bullets in 10 seconds. I can't conceive that they thought that was okay, while respecting people's rights to have weapons. And the answer is clearly, we have people with mental health problems who have easy access to guns and commit all of the mass murders that we've got going on in this country, which by the government FBI definition is almost 3 a day right now, which is insane. Michael, same question.
Yeah, we think we're on the bottom rung of a ladder day to day, just like others, but we don't realize that there's 2 ladders below us. And it was often said that we're oppressed by the weight of the lives we are not living. And what do we have to do to show it? It's not, hey, don't show me that you've stood with the rich. Show me that you've knelt with the poor. And when you look in the mirror and you're on their level, rise with them and just continue to do. And the points that you made, those 10 pointers that you're going to bring out, that is the foundation that we talked about. So that, like I come back to, you take politics out of the equation and you're left with common sense.
Yeah.
And it's what we do with that common sense, because we can't be all things to all men, but we can be one thing to one child, and that is there for them.
Yeah, no, very well said. My dad sold life insurance, and One of his favorite phrases was, the only thing common about common sense is it isn't common. You know, and you know, I mean, and he would have particular professions who are well educated that were the toughest people to sell insurance to because their minds, what's the phrase? Their minds like cement, all mixed up and permanently set. You know, so you worry about that. So I'll throw the last question out, Michael, to you first. What have I not asked that I should have asked? You are a member of the Aspire Difference Foundation board. Thank you for that. You're a member of other boards and do an amazing amount of charitable work. But what have we not asked about or talked about that we must and should talk about before concluding this podcast?
I just think it comes back to what Noel Cunningham said to me, which we ask, what have you done for the world lately?
Yeah.
And I think that covers so many bases, because we can isolate, we can have a singleness of purpose, we can have the generality, but it's got to start with the accountability of us to do something. It's looking in the mirror and it's saying, okay, I wear a lot of hats today, but am I hiding behind that mask?
Yeah.
Once I remove that mask, I can do something and the ripples will flow.
Where can I make the biggest difference?
Yes.
Yeah. As a single parent in the past, Amanda Weiser, who is my executive director and president of the Aspire Difference Foundation, also a single parent, very focused on mental health first, stability in the home, kids, and a measurability. You know, a charity that is measured by how many of these kids actually get into kindergarten, able to read and write the alphabet, able to make basic sentences, able to do 1 + 2 = 3, and be able to be socialized to get along with their classmates and listen and take direction from the teacher. You know, I've got members of my family who are kindergarten teachers, and they're saying, Bernie, if that were possible in my classroom, oh my God, you know, maybe 3 or 4 kids come in able to read and write. Same last question to you, Aditi. What questions have we not asked? What points have we not discussed that we must cover before we close the podcast?
I think one of the things is I really like the ideas that you're proposing in the book. I would ask, how do you put a Marshall Plan in place? What's a low-hanging fruit? What is achievable, such that it builds a little bit more confidence in the system and the plan, and then you go on to step 2, step 3, step 4, right? So where do we start, and how do we make sure we actually execute and see it through fruition?
Great points. You know, one of the most important words in the world is hope. Please understand that in my career, starting, you know, after 10 years of teaching at the University of Massachusetts Business School and building the sport management program there, I went to work for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Last place, drawing 7,000 fans a game, losing $10 million. The Pirates had 7 players indicted in the federal grand jury, drug trials, because they were doing coke. Dave Parker, it all got out. I'm not letting any secrets out from the grand jury. $1,000 of cocaine up his nose every day. We used to give away these little radios that you could listen to Pirates games on. The fans would take the batteries out and throw it to him, you know, at him. I mean, just terrible. So I've sold hope all my life, you know, and as I look at this, how do we instill hope to that little child in the inner city, you know, and the single parent mom? So give her the support, or dad, give them the support so they don't have to work the second job, that they can actually work one job and start to be home for their children when they come home. Teach them how that Mondays is not McDonald's and Tuesdays Domino's Pizza. Not that there's anything wrong with McDonald's or Domino's Pizza, okay? But that's not what the mom's responsibility is. But you know, when you see where they've grown up in food deserts, how do you expect them to do anything different with the cooking for those kids and that health and ability of that? Give them the love, give them the nurture, give them the support. And the way we work through Aspire Difference Foundation is through existing third-party providers, existing charities. We fund them so that they can do more of the great work they do, whether that's, paying for our house or an apartment or whatever, which we do, whether it's paying for a car, after a month or so of being in the Uber, showing they're reliable, getting them, an old banger. It's not going to be a great brand new car, but a reliable transportation to go to the job. And then developmental tools. We do a lot of funding of developmental tools that really make a difference for a lot of people. So to everybody listening to the podcast, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your attention, particularly to Aditi, a very successful executive. We wish you the best and continued growth in FanEQT. And we certainly appreciate your time. Thank you for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. Really nice to meet you, Michael and Bernie.
Nice meeting you too.
Great to have you on the podcast. And to Mike, my friend for over 30 years, my first friend here when I moved to Denver, part of my lifeline here in Denver. Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. A lot of it is contained in his book. Great book. Please check it out. Life's Too Short for Leftovers. There's a message there. And where did he learn that? From the cooks of third world countries.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Bernie.
Okay. So again, I refer you back to the AspireDifferenceFoundation.org website or BernieJMullen.com, to donate or purchase a copy of the book. This is number 1. We're actually going to be shooting the second podcast very shortly, but there are 12 podcast topics, starting with this one, the big picture of reimagining America's dream, making it attainable for all. Thank you very much for viewing. And as our panelists and I said today, go do something. What did you do today? The legendary words of our good friend Noel Cunningham, brilliant restaurateur. What did you do today for someone else? Thank you and God bless you.